It was a quiet night in a small town where everyone knew each other, and the streets were mostly empty. The moon was high, but it barely lit the edges of the forest surrounding the town. Most people were asleep in their homes, but one boy, who lived near the edge of the trees, couldn't sleep. He had always been curious about the world beyond the town, about mysteries and stories that adults dismissed as nonsense. Tonight he felt something different, a strange pull toward the woods. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and earth. He sat at his window and watched the sky, hoping to spot something unusual, just out of instinct. Suddenly, a flicker of light caught his eye. It was not like a plane or helicopter. The light moved in a strange way, jerking forward and then pausing mid-air. He blinked, thinking he might be imagining it. But the light grew brighter and hovered above the forest. Curiosity got the better of him, and he quietly slipped out of the house, careful not to wake his family. His heart pounded as he approached the edge of the woods. Every step made the leaves crunch under his feet, and the distant light seemed to react to his movement, pulsing brighter for a moment before dimming. He felt a mix of fear and excitement. Something was happening, and he could not ignore it. When he reached a small clearing, the source of the light became clear. A large silver object hovered just above the ground, glowing faintly with colors he had never seen before. It wasn't just a simple light. It shimmered and changed shape slightly, like it was alive. The boy froze, unsure whether he should run or get closer. Every instinct screamed danger, yet he felt compelled to keep watching. As he watched, he noticed movement near the object. Shadows moved inside the light, but they didn't look human. They were tall, thin, and their limbs seemed slightly too long. Their heads were round, and a soft glow came from their eyes. The boy's breath caught in his throat. He had read stories about aliens in books, but seeing them here, real and alive, was far beyond anything he could imagine. Then he saw something that made his blood run cold. Near the edge of the light, a small figure struggled. It was a child, one of the town's kids who had been missing for a few days. The boy recognized him immediately from school and the neighborhood. His small body was lifted gently by the alien figures, and they moved toward a part of the forest he had never seen before. They seemed calm, but there was something terrifying about the way they handled the child, as if he was part of an experiment. The boy wanted to scream, to call for help, but he knew no one would believe him. The town had always been skeptical about strange stories. He took a deep breath and made a decision. He had to follow, but quietly. He kept to the shadows, moving carefully among the trees, avoiding dry branches that could snap under his feet. Every step made his heart pound faster, but he could not stop. As he went deeper into the forest, the trees grew taller, and the light from the alien object became more pronounced, illuminating the path ahead. Strange sounds surrounded him, not like any animal he had heard before. Low hums, clicks, and faint whispers that seemed to come from the air itself made him shiver. The forest felt alive in a way he had never noticed. Finally, he reached a clearing larger than any part of the forest near the town. The alien object had landed here fully, and the aliens were busy around it. The child was still in their care, seemingly unharmed but unconscious. The boy noticed the ground around them wasn't normal either. There were faint lines, glowing symbols etched into the dirt. The symbols pulsed with the same light as the object. He couldn't understand what they meant, but he sensed they were important, part of some ritual or process. The aliens seemed to be speaking to each other, though no sound came from their mouths. Their communication was strange, like patterns of light moving between them. The boy realized he had stumbled into something far beyond his understanding, something that humans were not meant to see. His mind raced. Should he run back and get help? Should he try to intervene? He was only a boy, but he felt responsible in some way. As he watched, the child stirred. The aliens paused for a moment and seemed to examine him. Then one of them moved closer, holding a small device that glowed with red light. The boy held his breath. It looked like they were studying the child, trying to understand him or extract something from him. The tension in the air was unbearable. Every second felt stretched, every movement filled with danger. Suddenly, a sound broke the silence. A twig snapped under the boy's foot. The aliens immediately turned, their glowing eyes searching the darkness. The boy froze, hoping the shadows would hide him. One of them stepped forward, and the light from their eyes swept across the clearing, pausing near where he hid. His heart raced and he felt his knees shake. But then, unexpectedly, the aliens didn't attack. Instead, they seemed to sense something else. One of them approached the child again. and the device it held started to emit soft pulses almost like a heartbeat. The child moved slightly as if responding to the pulses. The boy watched, astonished, as the aliens carefully set the child down, and he slowly opened his eyes. There was a strange calmness in the air now. The boy couldn't explain it, but it was as if something had shifted. The child sat up, blinking, looking around at the forest and the aliens. The aliens didn't seem hostile anymore. The boy felt a glimmer of hope, though he couldn't understand what had just happened. He realized he needed to leave before the aliens noticed him again, but he also knew he could not stop here. Something bigger was happening, something that the town would never believe. He had to remember everything, every detail, because this was just the beginning. As he quietly backed away from the clearing, the light from the alien object dimmed, and the creatures disappeared into the forest. The boy's mind raced with questions. Who were they? What did they want with the child? And why did it feel like the child was somehow okay now despite everything? By the time he returned home, the night had grown colder, and the first signs of dawn appeared on the horizon. He slipped back into his room, heart still pounding, mind filled with images he could barely comprehend. He knew one thing for certain: his life had changed forever. The forest was no longer just a place of trees and shadows. It held secrets that humans could barely imagine. Secrets that could shake the town and the world if anyone ever learned the truth. And as he drifted into a restless sleep, one thought stayed with him, sharp and clear. This was only the beginning of a story far bigger than he could have imagined. A story that would challenge everything he knew about life, about fear, and about what it truly meant to survive. The next morning, the town was buzzing with tension. News had spread that the young child had disappeared during the night. Parents were frantic, and whispers of what could have happened filled every corner of the small community. The local authorities searched tirelessly, combing the streets, the woods, and every empty building nearby, but there was no trace of him. It was as if the child had vanished into thin air. The boy who had seen the strange lights the night before knew better. He had seen the child taken by beings that no one would believe existed. His stomach twisted with worry. He had hoped that someone else might have noticed the odd lights or the unusual sounds, but he had seen no one else awake. He knew he had to do something. He couldn't wait for adults who didn't understand the situation. As the day passed, more townspeople started talking about strange things. Some said they had seen flickers of light in the sky, moving faster than any plane could. Others mentioned shadows near the edge of the forest, shapes that didn't belong. Many dismissed these stories as imagination or fear, but a few remembered children who had gone missing before in nearby areas under mysterious circumstances. Fear began to creep into the town like fog, slow but unavoidable. The boy spent the day thinking, pacing in his small room, trying to make sense of what he had seen. He wondered why the aliens had taken the child. Was it to harm him? Or did they need something from him? The memory of the glowing device and the calm way the child had responded haunted him. He knew one thing for certain. The child was in danger, but the danger might not be as simple as it seemed. By late afternoon, the boy decided he could not wait any longer. He packed a small backpack with a flashlight, a few sandwiches, and a bottle of water. He knew the forest well, having played there many times, but he also knew that venturing deeper into unknown territory carried risks. He hesitated for a moment at the edge of his home, looking back at the quiet streets, wondering if he was making the right choice. But the thought of the child alone and possibly hurt pushed him forward. As he entered the forest, the sounds of the town faded behind him. Birds flew silently above, disturbed by his presence, and the wind whispered through the trees as if warning him to turn back. But he pressed on, careful with each step. The forest seemed darker now than the night before. Shadows clung to every tree and rock, making familiar paths look strange and threatening. He followed the trail he remembered from the night before, the faint glow of the object etched in his mind. It wasn't easy to track. The forest had hidden paths, sudden dips and tangled branches, but he moved steadily, fueled by determination and fear for the child. Each time a branch cracked under his foot, his heart jumped, imagining the alien creatures finding him. Yet he knew he could not falter. Hours passed, and the boy finally reached the clearing again. It was larger in daylight, and he could see things he hadn't noticed the night before. Strange marks on the ground formed a pattern, almost like a map, and faint impressions in the soil suggested the aliens had moved around, dragging something heavy. The boy's stomach churned as he realized that the child had been taken deeper into the forest. He crouched behind a fallen log, watching and waiting. Then he saw them, the tall, thin beings with glowing eyes. They moved with purpose, carrying objects that looked alien, some of which pulsed softly with light, and there in their midst was the child. He was unharmed but clearly frightened. The beings weren't paying attention to the boy at first, focused on their strange tasks, but their presence alone made him feel trapped and small. The boy noticed something odd. The aliens didn't move randomly. They seemed to follow patterns, almost like they had a plan. Some of them communicated silently, beams of light moving between them. He could not understand it, but he sensed it was important. Whatever they were doing, it was not chaotic. It had order and purpose. Suddenly, one of the aliens noticed movement behind the log where he hid. Its glowing eyes swept in his direction, and for a moment the boy thought he would be discovered. He froze, holding his breath, every muscle tense, but the alien turned back toward the child and continued its work. Relief washed over him, but he knew he couldn't stay in one place for too long. He realized he needed a plan. He couldn't just run in blindly. Observing the aliens carefully, he started to notice patterns in their movement. Some would guard the edges of the clearing while others worked near the child. He memorized their steps and the timing of their patrols, hoping it might help him if he ever needed to act. As night approached, the forest grew darker and colder. The boy had no time to waste. He had to decide whether to follow them now or wait until later. He chose to move quietly behind the aliens, keeping to shadows and using the trees as cover. Each step was slow and careful. The forest seemed alive, almost aware of his presence, making every rustle of leaves feel like a warning. They moved deeper into the woods to a part the boy had never seen. The trees grew thicker, their roots tangled, making it difficult to walk without tripping. The light from the aliens' objects illuminated the path ahead in strange colors, casting moving shadows that made it hard to distinguish between what was real and what was not. The child walked with them, seemingly unconscious but protected. The boy's heart pounded with fear and hope. At one point, the aliens stopped near a small clearing. They placed the child on the ground, and one of them held a glowing object above him. A strange hum filled the air, vibrating through the boy's chest. He could feel it in his bones. The child's eyes fluttered open slightly, and the boy noticed a small smile. It was subtle but real. The alien seemed calm, almost reverent. It was clear now that the child had some kind of connection with them, though he could not understand it. The boy wondered what that connection could be. Was it something special about the child? Something the aliens recognized? He realized that this was no ordinary abduction. Something more complicated and mysterious was happening. He felt both relief and anxiety. Relief that the child wasn't being harmed, and anxiety because he didn't know what would happen next. The night deepened, and the boy decided to retreat for the moment. He knew he could not confront the aliens yet. He needed to gather more information and think carefully about how to help the child safely. As he quietly moved back through the forest, he reflected on what he had seen. The world was far bigger and stranger than he had imagined. Forces beyond human understanding were at play, and he had a glimpse of something extraordinary. By the time he returned home, the town was quiet again. He slipped into his room, exhausted but determined. He knew the child's disappearance was only part of a larger story. The alien's presence was a mystery that could not be ignored. He made a promise to himself. He would find a way to help the child and understand what these beings wanted. He knew the path ahead would be dangerous, but he also understood that courage and careful thinking were his only tools in a world that had suddenly become far more dangerous and mysterious than he had ever imagined. As he lay in bed, sleep did not come easily. Every sound in the night made him sit up, imagining the aliens returning or moving silently through the town. He thought about the child, about the strange glowing devices, and about the forest that now seemed alive with secrets. One thing was certain: his life and the life of the town would never be the same again. The disappearance had opened a door to a reality that humans were not meant to see, and he had crossed the threshold first. The boy had never seen anything like the place they were heading to. The forest grew darker and stranger with every step, the trees twisting into shapes that seemed almost alive. Shadows moved where there should have been none, and faint whispers like the wind carrying voices brushed past his ears. He kept low, careful not to make a sound, his eyes fixed on the child and the aliens moving ahead. Soon they emerged into a clearing unlike anything the boy had ever imagined. The ground was smooth, almost metallic, reflecting the faint light from the glowing objects the aliens carried. Strange plants grew here, tall and thin with luminescent leaves that pulsed gently like they were breathing. The air smelled sweet but unfamiliar, like a mixture of flowers and electricity. The boy realized he had crossed into a place that was not part of the forest, not part of the world he knew. The aliens stopped at the center of the clearing. They arranged the child carefully on a platform that seemed grown from the ground itself, like it had sprouted naturally, but was shaped with purpose. The glowing device hovered above him, emitting a soft, steady hum. The boy crouched behind a large glowing root, barely daring to breathe, his eyes wide with fear and wonder. The child lay still, but his eyes flickered open slightly. The boy could see his lips move as if speaking quietly to the device. Then something incredible happened. The glowing object reacted. It pulsed, sending waves of light up into the air, and the alien being stepped back almost in reverence. The boy could not understand what was happening, but he sensed that the child was doing something extraordinary. The aliens began moving around the platform, their glowing eyes focused on the child. They weren't hostile. They seemed curious, careful, and precise in their movements. The boy's heart pounded as he realized that the child might be able to communicate with these beings in a way that no human could. Fear mixed with amazement. He had never seen anything so strange, so otherworldly, and yet the child appeared safe. Suddenly, one of the aliens extended a long, thin limb toward the child. The boy froze, expecting the worst. But instead of harming him, the alien seemed to offer something. A small orb of light that floated in the air, hovering just above the child's hand. The child reached out and touched it, and the orb merged with the device above him. The clearing filled with a soft, harmonic sound like music made from light itself. The boy could feel it vibrating through his chest, a gentle, calming energy that seemed to make the forest itself hum. The boy watched in awe. The child's face was calm, almost serene, as if he understood something no one else could. The aliens did not interfere. They simply observed, moving carefully around the clearing. It was clear that the child had a connection with them, some way of communicating or interacting that the boy could not explain. He felt a mix of hope and confusion. How could a human child interact with beings from another world like this? Then the boy noticed something that made his stomach turn. Beyond the clearing, a shadow moved. It was large, massive, unlike anything he had seen before. The aliens referred to it as the monster. It was being fed something by the aliens, a strange, pulsing substance that seemed alive. The child had been placed near it, and the boy feared for the child's safety. The monster shifted slightly, its huge eyes glowing faintly, but it did not attack. Instead, it seemed aware of the child's presence, as if recognizing something important. The boy felt a cold wave of fear. He realized that he had stumbled into a world where humans were completely powerless. These creatures, the aliens and the monster, were beyond anything he had ever imagined. And yet, the child was at the center of it all, seemingly untouched by the danger. There was a force here, some connection between the child and the beings that he could not understand. He watched as the aliens continued their strange ritual. The monster moved closer, its massive head lowering, sniffing or studying the child. The child's small hand reached out again, and the monster paused. The boy could see the tension in the air, a moment where life and death seemed to hang by a thread. But then the child's touch did something. The monster's eyes softened, its movements becoming less threatening. It was as if the child's presence calmed it. The boy could not believe what he was seeing. A creature that looked like a predator, capable of immense power, had stopped, almost as if recognizing the child as something different. He felt hope for the first time since he had followed the aliens into the forest. Perhaps the child was safe after all, though the danger was still very real. As the night wore on, the boy stayed hidden, observing every movement. The aliens communicated with each other, exchanging pulses of light that formed patterns he could not understand. The child remained at the center, somehow controlling or influencing what was happening. The boy realized that this was more than an encounter. It was a complex interaction between worlds, and the child was at the heart of it. Hours passed, and the aliens finally began to retreat. They moved away slowly, keeping the child at the center until the last moment. The monster followed at a distance, but it did not move aggressively. It was as if the entire scene had been carefully choreographed, and the child had played a key role in the outcome. The boy felt a mixture of relief and awe. He had never seen anything like it in his life, and he knew he would never forget it. Once the aliens and the monster disappeared into the shadows, the boy approached cautiously. The child sat up, looking around with wide eyes but unharmed. He seemed aware, almost calm, despite everything that had happened. The boy ran to him and whispered his name, and the child nodded, recognizing him as a friend. Relief washed over him. The child was alive, and for now the immediate danger had passed, but the boy knew this was only the beginning. The forest held secrets, and the aliens were not finished. The child's connection with them was extraordinary, but it was also fragile. Any wrong move could change everything. He helped the child to his feet and began to guide him back through the forest, careful to stay hidden. Every shadow, every rustle of leaves reminded him of the monster, the aliens, and the strange world they had just witnessed. As they moved, the boy thought about what he had seen. The child had survived something no one else could understand. The aliens were intelligent and precise, and the monster, though frightening, was not mindless. Everything had a pattern, a purpose, and somehow the child had been at the center of it all, interacting with these beings in a way that was almost magical. By the time they reached the edge of the forest, the first light of dawn was breaking. The boy guided the child carefully back toward the town, making sure no one saw them. They emerged quietly, slipping into the streets as the town slowly woke. The boy could feel the weight of what had happened pressing on him. He knew he could not tell anyone everything. No one would believe it. But he also knew he had to protect the child and understand what had happened. That morning, the boy watched the child reunite with his family. Tears were shed, questions were asked, and the town rejoiced at his safe return. Yet the boy remained quiet, observing from a distance. He had seen a world that no one else could imagine, and he carried the secret like a heavy stone in his chest. The forest, the aliens, the monster, and the child's strange power, they were all part of a reality that the town had no idea existed. As he walked back home, the boy realized that nothing would ever be the same. The encounter had changed him, opened his eyes to something beyond human understanding. He knew the aliens might return, that the forest held more secrets, and that the child's connection to them was only the beginning of a story far bigger than anyone could imagine. And deep down he understood that courage, curiosity, and careful thinking would be the only way to survive in a world that was no longer just ordinary. The boy could not stop thinking about what had happened in the alien clearing. The child was safe for now, but the memory of the monster and the glowing being stayed with him like a shadow he could not shake. That night he barely slept. Every sound, the creak of a branch, the howl of a distant animal, even the wind through the trees, made him sit up, imagining the aliens returning. He knew deep down that the encounter had not ended, that the forest held more secrets than anyone in the town could imagine. By the following evening, curiosity and worry pulled him back toward the forest. He couldn't let the child face what he had seen alone, not if the aliens returned. With a small backpack containing a flashlight, water, and a notebook, he slipped out of the house once again. The town streets were quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your own thoughts feel louder. His heart pounded as he reached the forest's edge, the trees looming like dark sentinels. He moved carefully, remembering the path from the last night. The forest seemed different in the fading light. Shadows stretched longer, and every movement of leaves and branches seemed purposeful, as if the forest itself was aware of his presence. But the boy pressed on. He had to see if the child was truly safe, and perhaps understand what the aliens and the monster were really doing. As he neared the clearing, he noticed faint glowing lights ahead. The aliens had returned, and this time something was different. They were more numerous, and their movements were precise and deliberate. The monster was there too, a massive shape that made the boy's stomach tighten with fear. But to his surprise, the monster did not move toward the child aggressively. Instead, it lingered nearby, observing, almost cautious. The child sat on the ground, looking calm despite the strange alien presence around him. His small hand reached toward the glowing device once more, and the boy realized something incredible. The child was not just a passive participant. He was interacting with the alien world, influencing it in ways that were subtle but powerful. Every time he moved, the glowing device pulsed, and the aliens responded, adjusting their movements as if following his lead. The boy could hardly believe his eyes. A creature that had seemed dangerous, terrifying even, was now waiting patiently, almost respectful of the child. The air was thick with tension and wonder. The aliens continued their ritual, but it was clear that the child's presence had changed everything. The boy felt a mix of fear, relief, and amazement. He had never seen anything like this before. Suddenly, the monster shifted. Its enormous head moved closer to the child, but instead of attacking, it lowered slowly, as if bowing. The child reached out his small hand and touched the creature's enormous snout. The monster's eyes, glowing faintly, softened even further. It was an unexpected moment, almost unbelievable, and the boy realized that the child had a connection with the creature, some way of calming it that no one else could. The boy watched closely, noticing subtle details. The monster's movements were deliberate, controlled by something more than instinct. The aliens did not interfere. They simply observed, almost reverently. The child's small gestures influenced the entire scene. The boy understood that this was the twist no one could have predicted. What had seemed like a dangerous situation was turning into something extraordinary, something that blurred the line between fear and understanding. For the first time, the boy dared to step a little closer, hidden behind a cluster of trees. He saw the child smile faintly, communicating without words with the monster. The glowing device above the child pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat, and the aliens adjusted their positions in perfect harmony. The boy felt awe and hope. Somehow the child had changed the rules of the world around him. He realized that the child's courage and innocence were powerful in ways he had never considered. The monster, which had seemed like a threat moments ago, was now calm. The aliens, which had inspired terror, were now observers. The boy's fear slowly shifted to wonder. He saw a truth in front of him. In the presence of pure courage and calm, even the most frightening beings could respond in unexpected ways. Then, something else happened. The monster lowered closer, nudging the child gently. The child laughed softly, a sound so human and pure that the boy felt a wave of warmth and relief. The aliens seemed to acknowledge this moment, pausing their movements, their glowing eyes focused entirely on the interaction. The boy realized that the forest, the aliens, and the monster were all reacting to the child's presence, recognizing something extraordinary within him. The boy could not resist any longer. He stepped slightly forward, careful not to draw attention. The child noticed him and nodded, as if telling him to stay calm. The boy felt a rush of emotion. Here was a child, surrounded by beings and a monster far beyond human understanding. And yet he remained brave, gentle, and in control. The boy realized that courage was not just about fighting. It was about understanding and connecting, even in the most impossible situations. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by the soft hum of the glowing devices and the gentle breathing of the monster. The boy took mental notes of everything he saw, knowing he could never forget it. He watched the child gently guide the monster back, signaling it to move away slightly, and the creature obeyed without hesitation. The boy could hardly believe that something so massive and terrifying could be controlled by a small child's calm presence. The aliens slowly began to leave, their glowing eyes dimming as they moved deeper into the forest. The monster followed at a distance, watching the child carefully but without aggression. The boy felt a sense of relief and awe. The danger had not disappeared, but the twist, the unexpected calm and influence the child had over the beings, was astonishing. What had seemed like a nightmare was now a moment of understanding and connection across worlds. As the aliens and the monster disappeared, the boy approached the child carefully. He whispered a question, his voice barely audible. The child nodded, reassuring him that everything was okay. The boy realized that this child had survived something that no one else could, not because of strength or skill, but because of bravery, calmness, and the ability to connect with beings beyond human understanding. The boy knew this experience would stay with him forever. The forest was no longer just a place of shadows and trees. It was a place of secrets, life, and extraordinary events that defied human imagination. He realized that what had seemed like a threat had transformed into a moment of wonder, showing him that even in fearsome circumstances, calm, courage, and understanding could change everything. That night, as they returned quietly to the town, the boy kept glancing back toward the forest. He knew the aliens might return and the monster might reappear, but he also knew something else. Human bravery, empathy, and connection could influence even the most incomprehensible forces. The child had shown him a truth that he would never forget. Even in a world full of unknown dangers, understanding and courage could create unexpected harmony. By the time they reached the edge of the town, dawn was breaking. The boy guided the child carefully back home, and the town remained unaware of what had truly happened in the forest. To the rest of the people, it was just another night, another missing child who had returned safely. But the boy knew the truth. The encounter had changed everything. The child had survived in a way that no one could explain, and the forest, the aliens, and the monster were no longer simply terrifying. They were part of a story that bridged worlds. As they quietly parted ways, the boy promised himself that he would protect the secret and watch over the child, knowing that more challenges were ahead. The twist, the shocking calm of the monster, and the unexpected influence of the child had taught him something important. Sometimes, the greatest strength lies not in power or fear, but in understanding and connection, even across the most impossible boundaries. The boy knew that staying in the forest any longer was dangerous, even if the child had managed to calm the monster before. He had seen how unpredictable the aliens could be, and he understood that their intentions were still a mystery. The forest no longer felt familiar or safe. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound amplified by tension. He had to get the child out, and he had to do it carefully. As they moved quietly through the undergrowth, the boy whispered instructions to the child, reminding him to stay calm and follow his lead. The child nodded, eyes wide but steady. There was a strange confidence about him now, an awareness that seemed beyond his years. The boy felt a mixture of admiration and fear. This child had survived something no adult could understand, and yet the danger had not fully passed. The path ahead was tricky. The forest had deep roots, uneven ground, and thick foliage. The boy had to guide the child carefully, stepping on solid patches and avoiding noisy branches. Every small sound seemed amplified, and he could feel the presence of the aliens and the monster somewhere nearby. It was like the forest itself was watching them, testing their courage. At one point, the boy paused behind a cluster of glowing plants. He could see the faint silhouette of the monster in the distance, moving slowly but intentionally. Its glowing eyes scanned the area, and the boy held his breath. The child instinctively reached out, and a soft hum emitted from the glowing device he carried. The monster paused, tilting its head slightly, and then stepped back. The boy realized that the child's presence was still influencing the creature, giving them a chance to move forward without confrontation. As they continued, the boy noticed another pattern. The aliens had left markers in the forest, faint glowing lines that pulsed softly along the ground. It was subtle, but he could follow them to avoid being seen. He guessed that these markers were part of the aliens' organization, perhaps to guide their own movements or to trap intruders. The boy made a mental note, careful to step only between the lines, avoiding the paths that could expose them. The tension was high. Every rustle of leaves, every whisper of wind felt like a warning. The boy kept checking behind them, making sure no alien or creature was following too closely. The child stayed calm, responding only when necessary, using small gestures to influence the glowing device. Together they moved slowly but steadily, a team in the midst of a world far beyond human understanding. At one point they reached a small creek, water flowing gently over smooth stones. It was a dangerous spot because the sound of the water could mask their movements, but it could also attract attention if the aliens were listening carefully. The boy motioned for the child to crouch low and move quietly along the bank. They carefully stepped from stone to stone, balancing on slippery surfaces, every step deliberate. The boy felt a rush of adrenaline with each movement. One slip could alert the aliens or the monster, and the consequences would be unimaginable. Once across, the boy spotted a narrow path leading toward the edge of the forest. He knew that beyond that path, the land would open into safer territory closer to the town. But they weren't out of danger yet. The monster appeared again in the distance, massive and looming, its glowing eyes fixed on them. The boy froze for a moment, unsure if it would attack. The child, however, stood tall and held his hand slightly forward, and the monster slowed, then turned to follow a different path. The boy could hardly believe what he was seeing. The child's calm presence still controlled the situation. The boy felt a mixture of relief and urgency. They had a chance to escape, but only if they remained silent and careful. He whispered instructions for the final stretch, reminding the child to keep the glowing device quiet and their movements slow. Every step was critical. The forest seemed alive with anticipation, and the boy felt as if it could detect any mistake. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the trees. The boy froze, his heart pounding in his chest. The child instinctively raised his hand and the glowing device emitted a soft pulse. The monster paused, its eyes glowing, and the boy realized that the child's presence had once again prevented disaster. They crouched low and continued, moving carefully to avoid detection. Hours seemed to pass as they navigated the dense forest. The boy's muscles ached, his hands scraped by branches, and his mind raced with questions. Why had the aliens taken the child? What did they want? How had the child survived these encounters with such calm and influence over powerful creatures? He did not have answers, but he knew that surviving this night depended on keeping calm, staying together, and trusting the child's instincts. Finally, the trees began to thin and the boy could see the faint lights of the town in the distance. Relief surged through him. They were close, but he knew they could not relax yet. The aliens might have noticed their movement and could still follow. The monster could also be lurking nearby. He motioned for the child to stay close and move quickly but silently. As they reached the edge of the forest, a sudden sound made the boy freeze again. It was a low rumble, almost like the monster was aware of their escape. The child raised his hand and the glowing device pulsed gently. The rumble stopped. The boy marveled at the power the child held, not in weapons or strength, but in calmness and connection. The final stretch was tense, but they moved forward successfully. At last, they emerged from the forest into the town's outskirts. The night was quieter here, and the boy led the child to a safe spot where they could rest. They both sat down, breathing heavily but relieved. The child smiled faintly, showing no fear, only trust. The boy realized that the child had not just survived the forest, the aliens, and the monster. He had guided them safely through it all. The boy knew that their journey was not over. The aliens might return, and the forest still held secrets that no one in the town could understand. But for now, the immediate danger was over. The child was safe, and they had navigated a world far beyond human understanding together. As dawn approached, they slowly made their way back to the town. The streets were quiet, almost as if the town itself held its breath. They moved carefully, avoiding attention, until they reached a familiar alley where the boy could finally let the child go home safely. The reunion with the family was emotional, tears and relief mingling, but the boy stayed quiet, knowing he could not reveal everything. No one would believe it. As he watched from a distance, he realized how extraordinary the night had been. They had faced beings beyond human understanding, navigated a strange alien world, and survived encounters with a massive, dangerous monster, all without traditional weapons or help. It was courage, calmness, and connection that had saved them. The boy felt a mix of awe, exhaustion, and wonder. Returning home, he thought about what he had witnessed. The child had survived through something that seemed impossible, changing the forest, the aliens, and the monster through sheer presence and understanding. The boy understood that human courage was more than physical. It was about calm, empathy, and trust even in the most dangerous circumstances. That morning, the town woke to normal life. People talked about the child's safe return, the police were relieved, and the streets slowly returned to routine. But the boy knew the truth. The forest, the aliens, and the monster had shown him a world beyond human understanding. The child had survived not because of luck, but because of a remarkable inner strength, and the boy had witnessed something no one else could. He knew the story was far from over. The aliens might return and the forest's secrets were still out there, but he also knew a truth that would stay with him forever. Courage, calmness, and understanding could influence even the most incomprehensible forces, and that sometimes survival depended on quiet bravery rather than force. The morning after their escape, the town seemed peaceful again, but the boy knew things were never the same. The child was safe, back with his family, yet the forest and the events of the night before had left a mark on everyone who had witnessed, even indirectly, the strange occurrences. The boy walked slowly through the streets, watching people go about their lives as if nothing extraordinary had happened. To them, it was just another night, another missing child who had returned. But to him, the memory of glowing lights, alien beings, and the massive monster remained vivid, unshakable. He thought about the child, now safe and calm, and how he had survived an ordeal that defied everything humans understood. The child had faced beings far beyond human comprehension, and had somehow influenced them, even controlling the behavior of a massive, terrifying monster with nothing but calm presence and courage. The boy marveled at this and felt a deep sense of awe and responsibility. He had been part of this adventure too, a witness and a helper, but the child had been the true hero. The boy returned home and sat by his window, looking toward the forest's edge. The trees were quiet now, but he knew the silence was fragile. The forest had secrets, and the beings he had seen were still out there. He thought about the glowing devices, the pulsing lights, and the strange patterns in the ground. What had seemed like a threat had turned into something almost beautiful, a world where connection and understanding could change even the most dangerous circumstances. Throughout the day, he replayed the events in his mind. Every detail mattered. The way the aliens moved, the patterns of light, the monster's reactions, and the child's calm influence. He realized he had witnessed something extraordinary, something that no one in the town would ever understand. He knew he could never explain it fully, not to teachers, parents, or friends. People might call him a liar or imagine that he had dreamed it. But he didn't care. He had seen the truth with his own eyes, and that was enough. The child seemed to recover quickly, as if the forest and the aliens had not left a lasting mark on him physically. But the boy could see subtle changes. He moved with a quiet confidence now, aware of things others could not perceive. There was a maturity in his eyes that was rare for someone so young, an understanding of forces beyond the human world. The boy felt proud and protective. He knew that the child had survived because of courage, empathy, and calmness, but he also knew that such experiences could leave a heavy weight on the mind and heart. As days passed, the town slowly returned to normal. Parents stopped worrying as intensely, and life continued with routines of school, work, and daily chores. But the boy and the child shared a quiet bond that no one else understood. They had faced something incredible together, something that transcended ordinary experiences. Every time they met in secret, they would talk quietly about what they had seen, their voices low, their words careful. Even without fully explaining it, they understood each other. The boy thought a lot about the aliens. They had been precise, intelligent, and mysterious. They had taken the child for reasons he could not fully understand, but their behavior suggested something more than just danger. Perhaps they were curious, studying or following a system that humans could not comprehend. He also thought about the monster. It had been terrifying, yet it had obeyed the child's subtle guidance. There was a lesson in that. Sometimes even the most dangerous forces could be influenced through calmness and presence rather than force. One evening, the boy decided to return to the forest, cautiously, just to see if anything remained. He walked slowly, sticking to familiar paths, his heart pounding with anticipation. The forest seemed quiet, almost normal, yet he could not shake the feeling that it was alive, watching, waiting. He reached the clearing where they had first seen the aliens and the monster. It was empty, but the ground still bore faint glowing marks, remnants of the strange lights and devices from before. The boy knelt down, tracing the patterns with his fingers, feeling a sense of awe and wonder. He realized that the forest had changed too. The trees seemed taller, the shadows deeper, and the air carried a subtle hum he could not explain. It was as if the energy of that night lingered, a reminder of the extraordinary events that had taken place. The boy understood that he had glimpsed a world beyond human understanding, a world where courage, calmness, and empathy could influence beings far more powerful than humans. It was both humbling and inspiring. The child occasionally joined him on these secret visits. Together they would sit quietly, observing the forest, listening for sounds, and noticing subtle movements. They never saw the aliens again, nor the monster, but their presence was felt in every rustle of leaves, every flicker of light. The boy felt a deep respect for the child, who had faced unimaginable danger and survived not through strength but through courage, calmness, and understanding. The boy also noticed changes in himself. He had learned to stay calm under pressure, to observe carefully, and to trust intuition. The experiences had taught him the value of bravery in unexpected forms. He realized that courage was not always about fighting or running. Sometimes it was about understanding, patience, and connection. Even when faced with beings and dangers far beyond human comprehension, the right approach could make the difference between survival and disaster. Months passed, and the memory of that night remained vivid. The boy and the child continued to share quiet moments, discussing what they had seen in whispers, careful not to reveal it to others. The town had no idea of the world that existed at the edge of the forest. The child's family slowly returned to normal routines, but the boy knew the truth. Their lives had been touched by forces no one else could imagine. One evening, the boy stood at the forest's edge alone. The wind rustled softly, carrying with it a sense of quiet anticipation. He thought about the aliens, the monster, and the child's remarkable influence. He understood that this experience had changed him permanently. He would never see the world the same way again. The forest was no longer just trees and shadows. It was a gateway to the extraordinary, a reminder that life held mysteries beyond comprehension. The boy realized that the child's bravery had not just saved himself, but had also taught the boy lessons he would carry for the rest of his life. Courage, empathy, and calmness could influence even the most dangerous forces. Life was fragile, unpredictable, and full of mysteries, but humans were capable of extraordinary resilience when they stayed true to themselves and acted with understanding. As the sun set, painting the sky with soft oranges and purples, the boy walked back to the town. He knew the aliens might return one day and the forest still held secrets, but he also knew something else. He had witnessed the impossible and survived. He had learned that human courage was not always about fighting. It was about presence, empathy, and calm action in the face of fear. The boy understood that the story was bigger than the town, bigger than the child, and bigger than himself. It was a story of survival, of connection, and of courage that transcended human understanding. And even though no one else would believe it, he carried the truth in his heart, a truth that reminded him every day that the world was far stranger, more beautiful, and more powerful than anyone could imagine. Years later, the boy would think back to that night, the child's calm presence, the aliens, and the monster. He would remember the fear, the awe, and the lessons learned. The forest remained quiet, but the memory of that extraordinary adventure lived on within him. He knew that life was filled with mysteries and that courage, calmness, and understanding could turn even the most terrifying experiences into something extraordinary. The child had survived. The town remained unaware, and the forest still held its secrets. But the boy knew one thing for certain: life would never be ordinary again. He had seen worlds beyond comprehension, faced dangers beyond imagination, and discovered a truth that would stay with him forever. The courage to act, the calm to observe, and the empathy to connect could overcome even the most impossible challenges. And as he looked once more toward the forest's edge, he understood that the story was not over. The aliens, the monster, and the mysteries of the forest were still out there waiting, but he was ready. Because now he had learned the most important lesson of all. True courage was not in fearlessness, but in the ability to face the unknown with understanding, calmness, and a heart open to the impossible.